Cute.
All right. Hey, folks. So got a real treat for you guys today. I've got a friend of mine on, Ollie Jackson. We've been friends for years, and he's a bodybuilder. He's a competitive bodybuilder. He's competed 5 times, 3 times in men's physique, twice in bodybuilding. That's what he currently does. He also holds down a full-time, very good job. He's in education, and he's in a relationship, and also has a dog. So he's a busy guy. He's a productive guy. I wanted to talk with somebody who's a friend of mine from the bodybuilding space, but is a real dude with commitments. And I wanted us to have a conversation about bodybuilding and how we do it. So, Ollie, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, mate. I think this might be time number 4 on this podcast now. Maybe time 5, something like that.
So, yeah. I think Ollie's been on a few times before on the podcast. So this is going to be a little bit different because we're now on YouTube, and this is going to be on YouTube, and my audience on YouTube is a little bit different since the last time you've been on. So there'll be a lot of people who aren't used to seeing you or know who you are. So I think I thought it'd make for a great conversation. One of the guys was saying last week that he really wants more of just us talking about bodybuilding and how we do things. So I thought it'd be kind of cool. So I'm going to start off with some leading questions. Yeah, I'm going to start with some leading questions. Also, by the way, just to tell the audience, Ollie's in Australia, so there's a bit of a lag with sound. So just start with some leading questions. Bodybuilding. So yeah, Ollie, with regards to your training, when is the last time you hit, say, a 1 rep max on a bench squat deadlift, or you did, say, a CrossFit kind of class, or you attempted to run like a marathon or whatever? Like, when's the last time you did any of that kind of crap?
I understand what you mean exactly by leading questions now. 1 rep max would be on deadlift maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I tested it so I could do the Ed Cohen deadlift routine.
Oh yeah,
so where it's specific to your max. Haven't run a marathon, I'll be honest. I did a 1 kilometer run in lockdown because I thought I'd give that a go. Ended very, very, very slowly. And a CrossFit class, I actually did one at the start of the year. Not CrossFit. It's basically weights for cardio as a bit of a challenge. And it fucking hard, to be honest with you. But to answer the leading question, I don't do that sort of stupid shit very often, to be honest.
Yeah, and I guess I want to lead off with that just too, because we're probably going to initially start talking about training. I'd like to go on to diet too, because it's a big part of it. But just to kind of make the point that neither of us, me or you, you're a competitive bodybuilder. I've not competed now for 4 years, but I probably will do at some point soon. We don't do a great deal of additional stuff. Like, our specialization is bodybuilding right now. Mine used to be powerlifting, as well as strongman, and that's when my training was different. But right now, we pretty much just do bodybuilding training. So, Ollie, what does a week look like for you for training?
For training, I think you call it a 6-day split. Really simple, actually. It's 4 days training, 2 days on, 1 day off. So it's quads back, off, hams, glutes, and then push. So quads and back are separate days, obviously. Off, and then, as I said, hams, glutes in a day, and then push for the last day. So that's a split around 6 days, but like, to actually, we're talking on the right day. So it's because I am very busy. It alters sometimes. Sometimes I have to do 3 days on, 2 days off, which is exactly what I've done this week. So I did hams, glutes Monday. Yesterday I did pull. Today I had to do quads because I can't train Thursday, Friday because I've got 16-hour days. You technically could train, but do I want to train at 10 p.m. at night when I've got another 16-hour day the day after? Probably not. So extra training day today and hit PRs. So it can be done today. And then, 2 rest days, and then I'll start the split again on Saturday. That's I think that's the beauty of having a bit of flexibility with your training and not stressing about being optimal.
Yes. Now, you mentioned your split there, and a lot of people will be a bit sort of confused by that split, because most people in the world of YouTube are used to upper lowers, push pull legs, full bodies, body part splits. what you put together there showed a bit of overlap for certain areas and a bit of basically individualization. And I want to just point out, Ollie is a big dude. If you can't see from the camera, like his stage weight is, I think, like 90 kilos.
Yeah, just under 90.
Yeah. So just under 90, and he walks around about 100, 110 for most of the year. So he's a big dude. He's about my height, I think maybe a little taller. So yeah, he's a big guy. So at his level of advancement, the split is mostly individualized. It's kind of like an upper lower, but mostly individualized to allow him focus on certain areas. Ollie's got enormous quads. He's like absolute quadzilla. So he's sort of emphasizing other areas to build those up. I know for the past couple of years, he's been on a Romanian deadlift kick with hamstrings and glutes has been a big part of his focus. So it just shows that at that level, there's a bit of individualization involved. I just wanted to point that out. But Ollie, could you kind of go through one of your days just to tell everyone, like, what does a typical training session look like?
Oh yeah, of course. Any one in particular you want?
If we go over the push, because I think that'll be most familiar to most people, and I'll talk through after that what my push day looks like as well.
Cool. Mine's really simple because I struggled to grow chest years ago, so I learned to grow it very efficiently. So I literally do 6 working sets of chest every week now. Well, every 6 days. So I'll do an incline movement. At the moment, it's incline Smith in the rotation, and I'll keep that in until it really doesn't progress, and then I'll switch it to incline bench and vice versa. Then I'm doing, so that's first exercise. I usually do a slightly higher rep week and then a slightly lower rep week. So 6 to 10, 10 to 15. So, pretty basic stuff. Exercise 2 is always a flat machine. I've got a really nice horizontal one at the gym I'm using. And it's just perfect height. It's not too low that it's hitting your shoulders, and it's not too high that you're missing half the chest activation. And I'll do the exact same there, 3 sets. So that's your 6 sets. Then I'll do a lateral raise, whether it's almost always cable or machine. Not the biggest fan of the dumbbells, just because my traps can overtake anything if I let them. So I find slow controls have always worked well with me for machines. And that's a little higher rep. It's always 10 to 15, 3 or 4 sets. Fourth exercise is always a press. At the moment, I'm doing it on a machine. I forget the word. So it's hands facing each other, because I had a small rotator cuff sort of strain a few months ago, and I think it was from that sort of shoulder press. So I've switched it, and so that's what feels comfortable at the moment. And then I'll do 2 tricep exercises, always one overhead, and then some form of push down as well to sort of round that out. So 6 exercises, 18 sets ish, 18 to 20 for the full workout. And that's probably my longest workout of the week, to be honest. Everything else is less volume, less sets.
That's very, very similar to how I set up things for a push day. So I'll have a couple of chest exercises, a couple of delt exercises. What with chest, because I'm quite tricep dominant in everything I do, and from being a powerlifter as well, I'll generally do 1 pressing exercise, 1 isolation chest, 1 pressing delt, 1 isolation delt. Then the way that I round out my push day is I actually only do 1 tricep exercise, because my triceps get plenty of stimulus. And then I do the spare tricep exercise. I change that into another bicep exercise because my biceps are lagging. So there's a bit of going back to the first point we mentioned about individualization. There's a bit of individualization in both of our routines. I'm a lot more biased towards hamstring and bicep exercises, which I very much lag on in terms of my physique. So there's a theme of that throughout my training. But in terms of the basic setup for what we do, it's very similar. My push day is almost identical. In terms of my volume, I'll do more along the lines of about, if you look at it for a week, whereas you're doing about 6 sets for chest, I'll do around about a range of anywhere between 8 to 16. Usually start off on the low end and going up to the high end. That seems to work okay for me. It's about where I tap out. Now, if we look at sort of sets and reps, you mentioned about 3 or 4 sets. How many of those, how close to failure are you going on those sets? Because I know I've seen you set up on a Smith machine and also on a power rack. So you've got the ability to fail. Do you fail in all three of those sets? How'd you do it? How hard are we working?
It's close to failure. Probably, I'd say by now I'm quite good at judging when I'd fail the next rep, and that's usually where I go. So whether that technically counts as one RIR, or whatever the kids are calling it these days, possibly, but it's personal mechanical failure. The rep before that is
so like zero RIR.
Yeah. And that's for working sets. And then obviously the first exercise, I warm up quite decently. I usually pick a weight, do 5 reps, a little bit up, 5 more reps, again and again and again. And then my first working set, I'll do 1 rep of that first, and then start having a decent rest until the first working set. I do believe in getting a little bit of blood into the muscle. And I also think you can feel. I found that when I originally did sort of, JP style training for a while, and I found that I wouldn't feel the first set that well unless I really warmed up properly, and maybe got 30 reps in on lower weight. If you do his style where you do 1 rep, then oh shit, it's working set. Yeah, like your body doesn't know what the hell's going on.
I completely agree. I mean, I went from bodybuilding, I went from powerlifting into a similar style of bodybuilding training. Like I did the JP stuff a little while back before I got into the high volume stuff, like in 2015. And coming from a powerlifting background, it made a lot of sense to me at the time, because I did basically exactly what JP did: 1 or 2 reps to warm up, going up on deadlifts, and then you go to your main set. But I found with the level of volume that I was using and the exercises that I was trying, I was just getting injured left, right, center. It just wasn't working. So yeah, I like to pump my muscles up completely. And nowadays I go more of a volume approach. So, on those 3 sets, are they all to that 0 RAR?
Usually pretty much, yeah. Sometimes if I'm mentally working up to a set, I might leave a rep in reserve. So for example, if I'm touching a new weight for the first time on the last set, the second set, I may not necessarily, almost subconsciously sort of leave a little bit on the table. But it's not necessarily process planned or anything like that. It kind of goes how I feel on the day.
Yeah, there's some fluidity involved. Like you want to be touching new poundages. Sometimes I think this is a really important thing, because I don't think progression is always quite that simple. I've talked about it on my channel before. Like you can progress not only in poundage, but you can progress in other ways. Like you can take less rest between sets. You can just clean the sets up. Like we used to call it owning the weights back when I was younger. Like let's say you worked up to a hard set of, I don't know, 5 plates on the deadlift for set 5. But let's say it was terrible. Over the next month, you can probably just clean that setup and make it like a smooth set of 5. That's progress. Yeah. So yeah, it's a lot more fluid. I like that. I think it's worth pointing that out to people, particularly when you get to the point where you're out of the beginner stage. You're not going to be able to realistically see a concrete poundage gain every single week unless you're in a massive, calorie surplus or whatever, or training's going very well. But in general, like you've got to be quite patient with that. I think it's worth pointing that out. On that note, Ollie, in terms of patience, poundage added per say month, or let's talk about our poundage added per month. What do you think is like a realistic rate of weight gain for somebody once they pass the beginner stage? Not weight gain, weight on the lifts. Sorry, weight on the lifts. Progression.
That's a good question. At the moment, obviously, I'm sort of 4 or 5 weeks out of retirement, so I am in almost like noob gain situation again, where, like, for example, today I got 2 extra reps than last week on the hack squat, and they were definitely slower than last week because I filmed it last week and it wasn't fast, but it wasn't slow either. So this time I mentally slowed down the reps, especially the last rep as well, because I'm a little bit sick. I think during like a bulking run, if you were on like a bulking run, sort of 3-4 months, depending where you started off, maybe sort of 5-10% on top might be
the whole run.
Might be quite realistic.
Yeah, for the whole run.
Yeah, like week to week. Yeah, for the whole run. Yeah, but obviously, completely depends on everything. To be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty sensible. I guess one of the things that I kind of struggle with just communicating to people is the degree of progress once you're past the beginner stage. It can get quite slow, and a large part of what we talk about on YouTube is people get stuck at the intermediate phase because they've done the beginner stage, right, where pretty much everything works. They've gained some weight. It's quite easy gains. But now at the intermediate stage, they want to carry on the easy gains because that's kind of what they expect, but it doesn't work. They also maybe have the wrong setup. They're maybe not working hard enough. There's a whole bunch of reasons where why people stay in that intermediate zone. Is all those guys we see in the gym who have been in that sort of 80 kilo bench, 2-plate squat, 2.5-plate squat kind of range for years, and they never really progress. And I think one of the things is just a lack of patience sometimes.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think in the intermediate stage, I think sometimes a little bit of focused progressive overload can really help as well. So when I was working with Alex, when I was definitely intermediate stage, I just placed second in the under 80s, and we both decided I needed to put a shed load of size on. So the program we used for about 2 years was there'll be a warm-up exercise, which was still almost a failure on every workout. But the second exercise was the Hail Mary, you must get an extra rep or an extra pound, or don't bother coming talking to me at the end of the day, sort of thing. That's sort of how he did it. And he sort of talked around the mental aspects of that. And for the 12-week runs we did on that, every single week there was a gain on the second exercise. So I think that's what we found really helped in the intermediate stage. As you said, when you get into advanced, it might not necessarily work for everybody. If you're built from steel and you're Eddie Hall, then sure. For the rest of us mere mortals who do get strains and pulls, there's definitely other things.
I want to rewind something you said there, which I don't want the audience to miss. You said you were on that routine for 2 years. So what do you think about people who are switching routines every 6 weeks because something's not working?
That's another leading question. It's the worst thing you can do. It really is. I think when you plan out your off season, if you know what exercises work for you, you could probably plan out 12 to 16 weeks with minimal changes. Oh, yeah. If for some reason you just can't progress on the incline dumbbell press, and it's been 6 weeks or 4 weeks or something, then you can look at switching the exercise orders or switching it out. But it's the worst thing you can do. It's what everyone used to do, train on instinct back in the day. But I think 95% of the program week to week needs to stay the same. Otherwise, how do you measure progress if you're doing hack squat 1 week, pendulum the next, leg press for your first exercise the next? You really won't gauge progress, which is very important, as you mentioned, from intermediate onwards. You can't wing it anymore.
No, you can't wing it. And I think the other thing that's really important is if you do change your routine and you just automatically point the blame at the routine, well, we're not looking at the rest of the factors. Because I imagine over the course of those 2 years, again, it's a leading question. I know that Ollie's nutrition is on point. And I imagine that over the course of those first 2 years, a large part of what he was doing was adjusting food, sleep, recovery factors, just refining all the things that go into being a bodybuilder. And honestly, guys, that's kind of why I brought Ollie on. I wanted to have a nice two-way conversation for you guys to see how the two bodybuilders actually think. Where do we place the focus? And you'll notice that so far, there's not been a lot of actual emphasis placed on the routine matters, or the exercises matter, or the sets and reps matter. None of that really matters. Working hard matters, but aside from that, once you're in a routine and you're working pretty hard, you're in a decent routine with some good principles, and you're applying progressive overload, a lot of that is just adapting the diet afterwards and really making sure that's honed in so you're actually gaining some weight. That's a large part of what I see is I think people need to reevaluate their thing. Why do you think so many people focus on the routine as being the cause of the problem, not other factors?
Much easier to blame the routine than yourself, to be honest. And think people get bored. Whether it's I'm going to sound like an old man here at 29, but not to blame like the Instagram generation, but like doing all these fancy exercises and everything has to look good for Instagram and this, that, the other. All the best people to follow on Instagram, they all say the exact same thing, that any fluffy exercises they post just to get some likes, but 90% of what they do is, it's boring as fuck. It's hack squat yet again every week. It's dumbbell rows yet again every week. It's not sexy. Like the day-to-day grind of bodybuilding, it isn't sexy. That's
I'm gonna guess your breakfast has pretty much almost maybe looked the same for the last like 4 weeks. I'm gonna guess, like with some variation.
Yeah, that's it. I have a busy breakfast, or I've got a time breakfast. That's it. But yeah. So tomorrow morning I'm on site at 7 a.m. So it's the easy breakfast. Yesterday I was on site at 8:30, so I took my time and had the steak. That's the difference between mine.
And in terms of your day-to-day meals, like how much? I know you've got a set menu, so you have like. In fact, we won't talk too much about meals just yet because I still want to keep on training. But I know in terms of your day-to-day meals, they're pretty consistent throughout, and it's the same with me too. Yeah.
Yeah, I 95% of the food is the same most days. Might change the order depending on what I feel like. Always like to have the same sort of pre-workout meal, but other than that, it's all quite similar.
So what I'm going to do now is I just want to throw some quick fire questions at you, which are going to be they're like YouTube classics basically, and I know you're not a YouTube guy, so I kind of want your opinion on it, so YouTube people can see, okay, what is this guy? He's a real bodybuilder. And this is what I like try and do on my channel only is because we come from a bodybuilding lifting background. I want people to see what we're about. So if I was to throw a question at you, and I know you get the context. Intensity versus volume, like Dorian versus flex, whatever, like what is your take on that in the grand scheme of things? How important is it?
Unless you're going for your pro card or upper elite, really doesn't particularly matter, but both will work. Both will get you to the intermediate stage. If you've got terrible genetics, then yeah, maybe we need to look at which one works for you. But your average Joe is going to get pretty far on either, to be frank. And let's say one is more optimal than the other. One will be 100% optimal. The other will be 96%. So 95%. So let's put that into numbers because I'm a management consultant and everything is data and numbers. You put on 10 pounds using one routine, you'll put on 9.5 pounds using the other one. If that's the real numbers. So the answer to that question is do which one you enjoy, to be honest.
Yeah. There's just a lot of sort of like zealotry about that and a lot of discussion. It's the kind of topics that when I make a video about intensity versus volume, it gets a lot of hits, and it's something that people really put a lot of focus on. So here's another one for you. Train to failure versus not train to failure. What's your take on the whole thing? Like, what do you do, and what's your take on the whole thing?
It's a good question. I think training to failure or almost failure, but I mean, I think it just needs to be, I think intense is the right word. So if you need to train to absolute failure in order to progressively overload, then yes. But if you can train to 1 or 2 reps in reserve and you're progressively overloading over time, then that's fine too. I know some people with some exercises, if they hit the first one to failure, the next 2 sets drop off. If that's you, then you don't take that first one to absolute failure. Like for me with chin-ups, if my first set of chin-ups is to absolute failure, my next 2 sets are awful. So instead of doing 12, 9, and then 6, I'll do 10, 10, 10, which is more overall reps. So yeah,
it's something that I'm guilty of. I like to do more volume, but I find that if I go to failure or I push the first set too hard, it just ruins me for the rest of it. Now, I think there's always going to be rep drop off if you're working closer to sort of 0 to one RAR. But in some cases, like Ollie's pointed out with chins, maybe that's something you're not doing. But I think in general, I promote working about 1 or 2 reps from reserve. But I think that's still very hard training. I think, you know, it's still only like maybe 1 rep away from the real true blood and guts.
100%.
Yeah. I think the biggest problem probably comes from the misinterpretation that everyone's just training hard when they're probably not. And so if they attempt to do 2 RAR, maybe they're more like 8. And I think that's a big problem. But this is the problem with definitions, isn't it? I think if you saw me or Ollie train, and we've trained together before, like you wouldn't necessarily think, okay, they're holding back, but it's some good, hard, effective training. And I suppose the biggest shit test of all that is, are we gaining? Are we gaining from week to week? Are we doing what we need to do? I think that's good. But yeah, I think in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's necessarily a massively important thing. I do talk about RAR quite a lot on my channel, and the whole idea of having rep drop-off. So if you do hit 12 on the first one, you're probably going to get more like 8 and then more like 5. But I talk about that as a way of ensuring that people know if they're training hard enough, if you get what I'm saying. So like, if you are getting a rep drop-off, then you can be pretty certain you're training hard enough. If you're not getting a rep drop-off, then you're definitely pulling back on that first set, whether you're doing it knowingly, like Ollie said with this example of chins, and that's fine. But if you're doing it unknowingly and you think you're working hard and you're getting like 10, 10, 10, then I guess we could maybe question that. And that's really what I'm about. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I know people will be thinking, yeah, Ollie's just said 10, 10, 10. Faz says don't do that. But like, I think it's a case of being aware. Like if you're sat there thinking I'm working really hard, but you're not doing that for a particular reason, then, you know, it's something to look at. And it caused a lot of a stir amongst my audience, actually, that video, because I think it got people really thinking like, okay, am I actually working hard enough or not?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I think maybe for a beginner, you almost put them to failure, at least for a while. That way they can learn what failure is, what true failure. As you said, if someone thinks they're doing 2 or 3 reps in reserve, and like you think they could get another 10 out, like that's where you'll have a problem. So I mean, I think that's why like these days training videos sending over to coaches is huge. And I'm quite happy that coaching is going that way, rather than sending people a 10 item drug list. They're asking for 3 or 4 videos every week of the training, which is the better way to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. So let's think of another like quick fire training question. What about training frequency? What are your thoughts on training frequency for like body parts? Because yours is individualized. So maybe talk a bit about your experience, but also general thoughts.
Like once a week, twice a week, but have both worked for me. I think it is very individualized, but I think both will work. So some people will have a couple of body parts which don't recover well, and then they'll be able to train biceps to failure 4 times a week or something like that. So over time, you can probably cater something a little bit close to yourself. In general, I kind of don't think it matters as long as you're recovering. Like most of what I do is it's once every 6 days now, but it's always been roughly once a week. Maybe I do twice a week on a weak body part. But I did years of push-pull legs, 3 on, 1 off, and I got very strong doing that, to be honest. And that was fully natty as well. So I think one liner takeaway, both work. Depends what you enjoy. Some people love doing 15 sets of chest and having some mad pump. Others don't. They'd rather they get bored, so they'd rather do 6 sets twice a week or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, just one thing before I wanted to ask you about weak body parts. One thing was regards to volume. Like what I've always found is with the body part splits. I mean, if you look at what Ollie's doing, he's doing a body part split, but he's not doing exactly very high volume. And I think that's probably the best way to do a body part split. I think at a certain point in the session, if you are getting up past like the 10 set mark, and there's a hard sets, I think there's going to be a pretty steep drop off in how effective your training session is going to be for that body part. You reckon?
Yeah, 100%. Like with back, I know I can do 12, and then there's a serious drop off. So what I do is I do 12, and then I do one or two what do you call them? The rack chins that kind of like chin ups, but and then I do one or two sets of those because they're body weight. You can do 15 reps and I can feel the whole back working. That probably grows zero muscle, that one exercise I'm doing, but it's kind of like a little check that I kind of do, that I know those 12 sets have been hard enough.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, so in general, I kind of prefer to put most of my clients on, if they're working at 4 days a week, it's usually upper lower, and it's for that reason, because I think you're going to be quite limited as to the quality of your sets. If you've got a regular guy, he's doing, say, 12 sets per body part, 15 sets per body part, to get all that into one session, it's going to be the latter few sets are really going to fall off. I think if you're fairly advanced and you have the ability to grind through that session, maybe there's a call for, say, okay, you could do a little more volume in one session. And Ollie's an advanced guy, and a lot of pro bodybuilders tend to be more advanced. So on that side of things, perhaps they've got the physical fortitude to push through and do a whole session on a back or a whole session on chest. I think for the majority of people that I work with, the upper lower split routines, maybe push pull legs, maybe even full body, depending on how it's put together, is quite a decent way of doing things, because the set quality remains quite high. You're always getting those first 5 fresh sets on every body part. And that's one of the advantages I find of like something like an upper lower or push pull legs. Right now, I'm doing between 4 to 8 sets of any body part per session. And for me, that's great, because it's a nice amount. 8 sets, I'm pretty tapped out. If everything's like close to failure, pretty high volume, 4 sets, everything feels really fresh. And that's 4 sets usually between 2 exercises. So yeah, with frequency, I think it's more a case of volume. Like, it's a case of effective volume. If you get to a point where the volume is becoming like more like junk volume, you've got to split it up. So firstly, like, what are your thoughts on that? And secondly, I wanted to talk to you about weak body parts and your technique for addressing those.
First point, I completely agree with you. If I woke up tomorrow and I was 15 years younger, starting again, I'd do 4 days a week, upper lower, for years and years and years. That's unfortunately not what I did when I started. I did 6 days a week of chest, quads, biceps, shoulders for about a year.
If you see all his quads, you'll know what he means.
It's why I've got quads, I think. Yeah, it's why I've got quads. And then to answer your other question on body part weaknesses, I think you need to learn to train the muscle group, which can take years. So like example on myself, chest was a weakness. You never guess it these days. Chest was a weakness after 2 or 3 years of training. I don't know what was activating. I don't remember, but definitely wasn't chest. And I had to relearn how to activate it. These days, I could probably do 2 push-ups and I'd have a chest bump, because it or automatically activates. My weakness these days is back, which I think it's a structural thing that people have weak backs for a whole host of different reasons I won't bore you with. I have learned to activate it a lot better recently, and there's about a billion things I could say on that, but I think learning to train it properly is.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
I agree on the point. Learning to train it properly, I think, is the first point of call. But with regards to the back structure, do you mean by sort of its insertions and attachments and things like that?
Yeah, I think that, but I think there's something to do with human anatomy. So how a lot of Asian bodybuilders, they have fantastic quads, but they all have weaker lats, and that's very, very common amongst that race. So I definitely think there's something there around how skeletons are built or how it all works. I know for me, when I'm more flexible, when I've got less body fat on me, I can train back a lot easier, get a lot better pumps. So I think there's something to that as well. But
yeah, no, that's interesting about that. Actually, I'm the same way. Back is one of the first, like right now I'm
But I
getting
don't
leaner,
know. So
and all of a sudden back just tends to blow up. It's great. But yeah, no, interesting discussion on that. I guess I wanted to take it back to the first point. So with weak point training, because it's a good point for a segment. I think the first point of call is definitely prioritize how to train it. I think that's important, and it can take a long time to really develop that connection. What we're talking about when we're talking about learning how to train it is, it's not just a case of moving weight. I think once you're past that initial stage where, okay, you've got your bench to 2 plates, 3 plates, whatever it is, at that stage, you've got to learn to move the weight correctly. It can't just be bounced. It can't just be powered up. It's got to, you've got to actually feel you've got to target the right muscle group. And I don't want anyone to think we're trying to isolate the chest with a bench press, because that's not how it's done. We're trying to just emphasize the chest a little bit more with a bench press. I think that's a better way of putting it. So I think that's the first point of call. Second point of call, I think, and I think Ollie would agree, because this is what he does, is slightly higher frequency. And I've got a theory behind this. I think if you've eliminated the potential of bad form, then the weak body part is probably a weak body part because structurally it's not as solid. And so it can't take that heavy amount of loading per session. So you need to split it up to accumulate more volume. Like I'll give you my biceps as an example. Whatever I do to my biceps, they just don't take on that much damage. They don't have such a sick pump. There's just not a great connection there. There's not much disruption. I can train my biceps 4 to 6 times a week and they won't be excessively sore. They'll just start to get sore if I'm training them 4 times a week. So I need to really up the frequency, because in any one session, they don't take on much damage. Whereas my chest, my back, my quads, they take on damage, and my triceps take on damage pretty much no matter what I do. And they are my dominant body parts. So I think there's a thing to do with, like, both structurally, but also the mind muscle connection on those body parts. I think it's the thing. What do you think?
yeah, I completely agree. I think some of it is genetic, and I think for Gen Pop, it to some extent probably doesn't matter as much. I think it's when you more get to the intermediate stage, which is where your individualization comes to. And, that could be anything. It could be doing a couple of a bicep exercise at the end of one of your leg days for extra volume. It could be every other chest workout, you do a shoulder exercise first. For me, I do one hamstring exercise on my quad day, which feels great on my knees for when I hit quads afterwards, for example. So there's definitely a bit of individualization that comes to that. But I think there's definitely some nuances in form that you learn over time, like lion leg curl. Don't hold the bottom of the machine. Do more of sort of a plank, so your lower back and glutes are completely taken out of it. Like most people don't, and I do it single leg, but most people don't learn that for years and years and years. So I think rather than pumping up the volume, really look at form as a starting point for weak body parts, and get someone, whether it's a coach, great, or someone with more experience than you, to look at you. If you don't know your weak body parts, it could be the bodybuilding judges from a show or whatever it is, because over time weak body parts can cause injuries as well. So it can be quite important.
Yeah, I found that with leg curls. You gave that example. It's a great one. I find if I drive my hips down into the bench, I get better sort of. It's kind of like, it's a different way of describing what you're saying. So rather than if you sort of arch your ass up, you're just not getting the right connection. But yeah, it's these little nuances. What I've tried to do is I've tried to video my lifts now, pretty much this entire little run that I've had for the past 4 weeks. And I do it because it's easy content, like it's Instagram, whatever, right? But it's easy content, but also it generates quite a lot of discussion. People like to know how I'm doing things. So that's another thing you can do. Just watch bodybuilders who you think know what they're doing and have a look at the nuances, ask questions. I think that's a great thing to do. So yeah, for sure. Ollie, I want to kind of move it on to diet, because that's probably the next big thing, and spend some time talking about diet. So, all right, if we go through, I'm going to kick off with some hot topics, all right? Because I think it'd be good to get our perspective on the hot topics, because that's what people are interested in. Firstly, let's go with the basic protein intake. What are your thoughts on optimal protein intake when you're bulking versus when you're cutting, and maybe why? Let's start with, say, bulking.
I think you can get away with slightly less when you're bulking, just because of basic physiological aspects. Like if your carbs are sky high, your protein doesn't need to be. And equally, when you're in a deficit, you want your protein a little bit higher to help with muscle loss and all that sort of good stuff. So me personally, so I currently weigh 102 kilos, which is 230 pounds, and I'm eating between 250 and 260 grams a day. So that's roughly a smidge over 1 pound of body weight, or in kilos, just 2.2, something like that. So I think that's more than enough. I've always been a higher protein person, just because I eat food. So like when I have 5 meals, like one of my meals isn't cream of rice with whey. Personally, it's a lot of meat, a lot of fish, a lot of eggs. So the higher protein works for me personally. But for example, if you had a lot of gut issues, you might steer on the lower end of high protein, if that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty similar to yourself. I think I prioritize whole foods as much as possible, and I do that with my Gen Pop clients too. Just like regular folk, try and have as much regular food as you can. Now, with the regular food, with the carbs and whatever else, you're going to have some incidental protein in there as well. And I think that's what Ollie's getting. I mean, he's getting 250 grams, 260 grams of protein. Probably 40, 50 grams of that is incidental, coming from like the rice, potatoes, all that kind of stuff. So looking at it, it's a good amount of protein intake for sure, and it all contributes. Ollie likes it higher. I personally, myself, I like it higher protein as well. But I also say that I would recommend in the scientific circles, they say it's something like 0.8 grams per pound.
Yeah.
So like for me, that'd be 150 grams of protein. But my point with that all is, like, I know that if I was eating 150 grams of protein, I wouldn't be satisfied. It's just not a very nice day. It's just not enough protein to make me feel full. It's a great tactic if you're struggling to gain weight, lower your protein, increase your carbs and your fats. But I think for the average person who comes to me, unless they've got a real hard time gaining weight, and most people who come to me don't have trouble gaining weight, they have trouble gaining weight at a reasonable rate, or losing weight, it's probably a good idea to put that protein intake up. And actually, we'll talk about dieting first. So for cutting, Ollie, what are your recommendations? I'll share what I've been doing.
For protein?
Yeah. Just for protein.
Probably a smidge higher. So best part of 300 grams. But towards the end of a prep, it might come down, just because calories need to come down, not necessarily protein. It's got to come from somewhere. I don't necessarily do the percentages but it'd be like 1.2 to 1.25 grams per pound. I've just got to.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, roughly what are your overall calories at that point? I just wanted to compare protein versus overall calories.
Oh, okay. I'd start a prep at maybe 3.2 or 3.4 thousand thousand calories, and then it would come down all the way to 2, maybe 2.2, and protein would probably come down like 10% during that time. So to put that in perspective, food comes down 33%, protein would come down 10% of that. So everything is really coming from mostly carbs. Fats come down a little, but I'm a higher carb guy when I bulk, and the fats always stay between 50, 80, something like that on the way down as well.
Yeah, I wanted to point that out about the percentage, because something that I've noticed with my own training and my coaching is, if I keep somebody's protein intake as a total of their overall calories at about that 40%, appetite is a lot more manageable. Like formerly fat guys, you put their protein intake at 40%, now all of a sudden they have trouble eating food. And they're like, look, boss, this is way too much food. And that's a good position to be in. I've actually had people come back to me and say, this is guys who have trouble eating, who like binge on a weekend or whatever. They come back to me and say, it's too much food. I'm not sure I can eat that. Like, sure. My reply is always, surely that's a good thing. Like, that's what we're trying to do, right? I think it's really important. So me personally, I'm currently on 270 grams of protein. I'm dieting right now. Currently on 270 grams of protein at a body weight of 180, about 180-ish. I think 182 pounds. So I don't know what that is in grams per pound, but it's a buttload of protein, basically. But my appetite is zilch. I'm fine. I'm in a position where I could miss a meal or two during the course of the day, and I don't worry. And that's me. Like, I'm a chronic overeater. But like, part of switching to bodybuilding has been this massive switch towards more of a bodybuilding way of doing things, and it's made my life so much easier. But on that note, Ollie, the disparity between what science says is the minimal needed versus what's best in reality is quite a gap, isn't there?
Oh yeah, 100%. And once again, it depends on a shitload of things. So if you're advanced and you're running everything under the sun, you will absorb a lot more protein, so you might as well eat more. If you're a beginner, like, I would never tell you to eat low protein, but if it was a little bit lower, you'd probably still gain almost the exact amount. Once again, going back to my optimal talk that I always talk about, if you're slightly off, you might be 95% optimal, which over time, like, you'd rather someone was 95% of the way there all the time rather than 100% there 6 months of the year, for example. So I think there will be some definitely individuality to this sort of approach.
Yeah, for sure. Love it. I wanted to go on to another quickfire question, which is probably going to benefit people quite heavily as well, is this whole idea behind both meal structure, like meal timing, and also nutrient, like how many meals per day, basically, when to have those meals, and also nutrient timing. So just to kind of kickstart this is what I'm currently doing. So I'm having 5 meals a day, plus on workout days, I'm having a intra workout. So it's 5 meals a day with roughly 50 plus grams of protein every meal. So I'm essentially eating around the clock. 8 o'clock, 11, 2, 5, 8, right? Which for me is a lot of food all throughout the day, pretty much, with a bit of space in the morning, right, and a bit of space before bed. Plenty of protein. Now, I'm finding with that consistent amount of protein around the clock, I don't feel that any one meal is overwhelming me in terms of, like, I don't feel sluggish. I don't feel tired. I feel like those are satisfying meals because they're anywhere between 400 to 500 calories. So they're not massive meals, but they're satisfying because I'm eating so often. And protein's high, and I feel pretty good on that amount. I personally feel it's the best way to run things for me. Could you speak on what you do? And then also let's both dig into like the fasting literature as well.
To be honest, I do the exact same as you. I'm always a 5 meal a day person. I have been for a long time, and I always aim for 50 to 60 grams of protein. And that's just because when I cook meat, it's always 250 grams because I buy a kilo at a time and I split it into 4 meals. Save time. I'm sure we'll cover that later. And that's just how it works. And I think that works perfectly for me. If I'm super busy at work, which I am, I can still squeeze meals in. I can work and eat at the same time. I've got very good at typing with one hand and eating with the other. It doesn't take long to wait for 3 minutes for the microwave to go. So, I mean, I can do that. But if I miss a meal, the meals are at this point still small enough that you could eat one an hour away or double up or whatever it needs to be. And I think if it happens once or twice, it's really not a big issue. If you're peak off season and you're caning the food in, yeah, that'll be hard if you're missing meals and trying to get them in. Equally, if you're 2 weeks out from a show and starving, once again, that might be an issue. But for 98% of the year and probably 100% of most of the listeners here, it's absolutely fine if the time of the meal is about a little bit off, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, love it. Fantastic. One of the things I talk about with meal timing and kind of just the options surrounding nutrition is sort of this whole idea of doing what's best for you in the now versus doing what's best for you for your goals. And a lot of the way that I set up my diet with the high protein, with the eating around the clock, which is slightly less convenient than, let's face it, eating 1 or 2 meals at night. I do this because I'm setting up to conquer my goals. Like, I know today I'm going to have 5 meals. Today's going to be a 100% win for me because this week's going to be a win. And if this week's a win, that means 4 weeks of my diet, I've been 100% adherence. And now I've got 16 weeks to go. So I'm sure it's the same with you. Like, you don't think about it every day, but you just know, every meal needs to be done right, ticked off. And so I want to just go into that and make that point, because a lot of my dietary options, they're not always set up for me having the best 2 p.m. meal on a Wednesday afternoon, like the most banquet gourmet meal, because I don't give a flying F. Like, right now, it's a Wednesday afternoon, we're recording this. Like, my next meal in an hour's time is going to be chicken and veg because I don't care. Like, it's going to get me to my goal. And it's a Wednesday afternoon. How much fun do I need to have on a Wednesday afternoon? Like, I'm just trying to say, not every meal needs to be a banger. That's kind of my message. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, I completely agree. Day to day, as I am pretty busy, I couldn't tell you what meal 4 tasted like today. I couldn't tell you what meal 3 tasted like. I just had steak and low-fat fries, which I remember. It was very nice. But when you're busy during the day, don't think it matters whatsoever. And you'll find when you diet, food starts to taste a lot better anyway. So that almost takes out the equation. I don't know if you've ever eaten food during a diet and you think, fucking hell, this is nice. Then you eat the same thing a week into your off season and it tastes like absolute garbage. Like, quick example, like during one of my preps, I could squeeze like a Quest bar into my diet every couple of days, into the macros, and I did that. And the chocolate one or whatever it was 100 calories and tasted really good at the time. I had one about 5 days post show and absolute trash. I couldn't believe that we used to look forward to that every single day. So to answer your question, if you're hungry or busy, I don't think it really matters. I think once again, off season, when you kind of don't want to eat as much and you're really getting towards that hard end, which to be honest, a lot of the listeners probably won't get to that extreme. That's when it becomes harder. But to be honest, at that stage, like, no food tastes good. You could have a triple cheeseburger from McDonald's and that wouldn't taste particularly good. That would just ruin your next 3 meals as well. So there's, I'm quite good at cooking tasty chicken these days. I've got the spices and everything down pat after all the years, and I know how to switch it up. But I think day to day, if you can make these sort of meals quite efficiently and just get them in. I'm not necessarily a food is fuel person. There's a bit more to life than that, but that is 90% of the way, I think.
100%. Yeah, they call it nutrition periodization, just like having the appropriate nutrition for different phases you're in. But I think what Ollie said at the end there is absolutely key, and I just want to highlight that neither of us, nor me nor Ollie, are trying to make out that we're just machines and it's just food is my fuel, kind of like that cringe. It's not like that. The food's got to taste good. All we're saying is we don't need a party in our mouth like just every Thursday night. It's not that serious. Like, there are other things to get pleasure from in life. So yeah, that's the kind of point I make. And it's kind of the thing that I like to talk about with a lot of clients, because another thing that Ollie said there is really good. If you carry on and insist on eating all these fancy foods, your palate will get so like dulled. You will need to have all this like really crazy food for even to taste anything. And I did that when I came out of powerlifting. Just having regular chicken, rice, and vegetables tasted horrendous. And I do think that's where a small percentage of my clients who come to me for the first time are looking at these meals and going, whoa, I can't eat this. Like, and it's like a guy who's addicted to porn, and like he just needs really extreme stuff to get off. Like, the solution is not to get more extreme. The solution is to calm this shit down.
Yeah, when you've got a bad case of porn remorse, like remorse afterwards, that's when you know.
we got to shut the browser down. That's too much time out. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's an awesome point, and I've talked about that on this channel before, so I wanted to highlight that because I think what you said there was really good. So the last note, because we're coming to the hour mark, is I want to talk about about practical stuff, right? Now, I prep pretty much all my foods except for once a week I have a free meal. That has made a massive difference in my life. Like, I prep everything. And I also have a fairly limited range of choices. So I've got my potatoes prepped, my rice prepped, my vegetables, my meat. And that's pretty much what I eat. For breakfast, I have my Greek yogurt and whey mix thing that I do with honey and nuts. Apart from that, that's my day. It's fairly basic. Can we just have a bit of a talk about the importance of being prepared when it comes to your food? Because we are all busy people, we lead busy lives, and neither of us have kids, but it'd be even more important if you've got kids and you've got, as well as all the rest of your responsibilities, the importance of actually being prepared. What do you think? Let's just talk about that.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, if I don't think I've ever had meal prepped and then eaten off plan if it wasn't planned, if that sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
But if you leave the cooking till last minute and there's an option to, get something that's a little bit easier, it's a lot easier to make that choice. So for me personally, I prep the meat, veg every day, but quite quick. I fry the chicken at the same time as I fry my beef, and then as the pan's cooling down and I've taken the meat out of it, I put the veg in, still got the sauce, and then put those into the containers. Most of my carbs, like microwave rice, microwave potato, that sort of stuff, or easy to eat stuff on the go. And then that's everything. So that's all my food for one day, prepped in like 10-15 minutes. And then I usually cook a steak for dinner from scratch. And luckily I like that rare, so it probably takes about a minute in the pan. But to highlight your point, yeah, it's very, very important. And it's probably the thing that we probably don't realize it because we're so far deep, but it's probably one of the most daunting things. Prepping 30 meals or whatever the hell it is, or whatever, but you just gotta work out the best way that works for you. Like, I like my stuff fresh, so I spend 15 minutes every day doing it for the next day. Some people will do 2 hours for the entire week, and that's better for them, and that's great. I guess you just have to sort of find what works for you. You've just got to do it.
I think you prep individual meals, right, for the day?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I'll have a container of the 2 meats and then a container with the veg, and I can eyeball a quarter of each for each meal, and then I just add a carb sauce. So it's quite simple.
So actually, yeah, Ollie does it in a very similar way to what I do. So I was going to highlight there's probably 2 ways of doing it. So I'll do the same thing as Ollie. I'll just cook up a whole batch. I mean, I cook it for longer periods, so I'll cook like 5 kilos of chicken for like 9 days. But the principle's the same. We'll cook each item separately and then put it together for a meal. The other way of doing things is if you prep just a full meal and put that in its own container and take that out. I've done it both ways. I think I prefer the way that I do it now, the same as Ollie. Just prep individual food items and then pick and choose the amounts based on either weighing them out or eyeballing them like Ollie does. That's a good way. I find it's an easier way of doing things. I think when it comes to the other way, prepping individual meals, that works. It's fine. Maybe it's good if you want to batch load and batch prep a few, like for a week. I think it's kind of cool. So you can prep an entire 20 meals, like, for the next week or so. That's okay. But I think, again, like you were saying, just you got to find what works for you. Either of those things work. But the point is, as long as you're prepped.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think when you're off season, it's nice to have a little bit of variety. So the way we do it is best. Personally, I'm sort of anal and OCD towards like the last 8 weeks of prep. So you best believe like every meal is like fucking perfectly prepared, and and that's the only time I'm actually thinking about food, to be honest. Like as soon as you finish, you're right, 2.5 hours, and there we go. But now, whilst it's more, flexible, and you just getting the macros in day to day, our approach right now is that's what works best for me. As I said before, because I like to switch up my order of meals throughout the day, depending on what I feel like. If I'm not that hungry, I know I'll eat rice instead of potatoes. Only prerequisite I usually have is I have a light meat and rice pre-workout. That's the only like definite constant I keep to be honest.
That's what I do as well. So chicken rice before workouts. Yep, same thing. It is scarily similar how similar our diets are. But yeah, I mean, this is it. A lot of what you guys see online in terms of, if it fits your macros approaches and flexible dieting and everyone's famous cookbook, like a lot of that is stuff to try and help you get you a break away from stuff like we're doing. But the stuff that we're doing is the majority of what your average influencer is doing. Like that's how bodybuilding is done. The distractions and the easy way of doing things, they're only supposed to be utilized every now and again as a break from the basics. So yeah, just bear that in mind when you're putting together your preps. But yeah, Ollie, it's been about an hour, so I think we could talk for a lot longer, but I think this will make for great content. So we're going to call it there.
Easily.
But, yeah, and I'm getting hungry. So yeah, awesome, man. Thanks for joining me. I really enjoyed that chat. I think people will get a lot from it.
Awesome, mate. Thanks for having me. As always, I'll catch you soon.
All right. I'll see you on the next one.